Welcome students of Form 2, Form 2A, and Form 2B, of course. Welcome to this video made by yours truly, Theo Martin, and I'm making this video as a part 2 of 3 videos about regional factors influencing tourism, like you can see quite clearly here. If you want to take the correct paragraph in front of you, take in front of you paragraph 2, chapter 5. This will be very helpful so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm working for the Sky Pre-University, and this is a part 2 of 3 videos about regional factors impacting tourism. Of course, we have a learning outcome, and the learning outcome is about the following. In this section, you will learn as a learning outcome, outline regional factors that impact the tourist industry. Outline means less than describing, less than perhaps explaining, but a bit more than just identifying and naming. You have to really put a few phrases in it. So the outline gives the main points of the factors that impact on the tourist industry. And in this part 2, we're going to talk about natural disasters, and we're going to talk about criminality. So again, all the wonderful attributes of our region, sun, sea, and sand for a lot of tourists, to our visitors, tourists to our region. At the same time, there are a number of dangers, factors that are a challenge to the continuing success and growth, crecimiento, of the tourism industry. But when I Google the region, I see, okay, luckily the crime rate in the country is very low. You can see that above, making Curacao a safe place to visit. So that's very good for us. We are green according to Canada and the United States. So we're safe. Although we know there are sometimes atracos, sometimes there are robberies, sometimes people get killed, but compared to a lot of other islands in the Caribbean, we are a safe region. And also when we look at earthquakes, okay, sometimes an earthquake happens, like last month in 2024, we had an earthquake, and some of you living in Bandabao may have felt it, but compared to a lot of other islands in the Caribbean, we are not. We are quite safe concerning earthquakes, hurricanes. Sometimes we have a lot of aguacero, we have a lot of rainfall. Sometimes perhaps the tail of a Caribbean hurricane or storm, like Tomas, more than 10 years ago. But still, compared to a lot of other islands in the Caribbean, we are relatively safe. Let's talk about natural disasters broadly in the region of the Caribbean. Yes, for instance, this one in Montserrat in 1995, the Soufriere volcano erupted, yeah, and the capital of Montserrat was being destroyed because of it. Yeah. So here you see that for some of islands in the Caribbean, natural disasters are a regular occurrence. They happen more than once. And of course, they influence the life on the island, the life of the citizens, but also a very important income, that is tourism. So look, words explained of this video. What's important also is meteorology. Meteorology means the scientific study of conditions in the atmosphere. Weather forecasting helps us a lot, so we know when earthquakes or hurricanes are coming nowadays. And this helps us a lot. And this is the meaning of the word meteorology. Yeah, so keep that in mind because we're going to use this word more than once. Let's look. Natural disasters. The Caribbean region is subject to a number of natural disasters. Yeah, ending Papimento is a quitanifica disaster natural. You can see that above here, including hurricanes, including earthquakes, and including volcanic eruptions. So these three are just the three main examples of natural disasters. hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions, idem pavimentu nostre bicelle, disaster non natural. All of these events cause widespread damage and threaten lives. Yeah, so they cause a lot of damage in the whole of the Caribbean. They threaten lives around the Caribbean. So for the citizens, that's very bad. Great efforts are made to ensure that residents are prepared for such a disaster, but the fact that they occur at all can be a reason for people to think twice about visiting the region as a tourist. Yeah, so perhaps they will think twice because the Caribbean sometimes is hit by a hurricane, the region is sometimes hit by an earthquake, and is sometimes hit by a volcanic eruption. And this might cause tourists to think twice before visiting the region because we want to have sun, sea, and sand, but we don't want to have a disaster. And it might cause tourists in the region, and it depends at Dosbia. It might cause to think tourists twice about visiting the region. And if a disaster event occurs in a country, then tourists will be unable to make their trip, perhaps because airports and seaports have been damaged. Yeah, so all of this might make tourists think twice before visiting the region. And it depends at dos via, yeah, before visiting Cuba or Haiti or Jamaica or Barbados or the Bahamas or Sint Maarten, because sometimes it happens on Montserrat that they are hit by a hurricane or hit by a volcano eruption or hit by an earthquake. And this causes damage for, of course, the citizens, and that's like the main thing because the citizens of the island are, of course, the most important. But it also hits the tourism on the long run because the public image of the islands might be hindered by an image of natural disasters, and tourists might think twice before they will visit the island. And on the long run, it will also cause economic damage because tourism has become a main source of income for a lot of islands in the Caribbean. Consequently, even if tourists could arrive, facilities might have been destroyed and services disrupted. Also during a time of emergency, a country's resources, and that makes sense, that's normal, will be devoted to dealing with the aftermath of the disaster. The tourists, and that's normal, are not the main thing that's important at that time. The main thing that's important at that time are the citizens, yeah, the ciudadano. Para un país está hopi más importante y no y turistana. The tourists are not important at that time. And I think that's normal because the country's resources will be devoted, will be aimed at dealing with the aftermath of the disaster. And the aftermath of a disaster meaning taking care of the people that have died, building new homes for the people who have lost their homes, burying the people that might have died, unfortunately, cleaning up the rubble, cleaning up the mess that the natural disaster has left behind, being it a volcano eruption or an earthquake or a hurricane that's passed to a Caribbean country. But nowadays we have things that help us. It is almost impossible to know exactly when earthquakes, yeah, to know when earthquakes and volcanic eruptions will happen exactly. But nowadays we have some technology that helps us. However, it is possible to predict, yeah, predict más o menos, not to the second, not to the minute, but like in hours or sometimes even minutes, it is possible to predict this because we have meteorology. Meteorology helps us. It's a scientific study of conditions in the atmosphere, which allows for such things as weather forecasting. So nowadays, because we have satellites, because we have sensory arrays around in the Caribbean, we have scientists working on predicting the meteorology and the situation in the atmosphere, but also the situation below the ground that can predict volcano eruptions, that can predict erupting volcanoes, that can predict earthquakes, that can predict hurricanes for us. And this is very helpful for us. So nowadays, we can predict, nos por pronosticar, yeah, we can predict when a hurricane will happen. Because of advances, actually, because of advances in satellite technology, we have an increased understanding in meteorology. We know when volcanoes might erupt, we know when earthquakes might happen, and we know when hurricanes might happen. And there is a recognized hurricane season, temporada de orcán, in which these storms are more likely to occur, more likely to happen. So sometimes you also get predictions when it doesn't happen, but a lot of the times it is close to an earthquake or to a hurricane to happen, and we are prepared. And better to be prepared and to happen nothing than to not be prepared and to occur something like an earthquake or a hurricane. And the temporada de orcán is a time when we discourage tourists from coming, but outside of the hurricane season, the tourists will come and they're more likely to be safe and they're more likely to have a good experience in the region. And outside of the temporada de orcán, Pafo et temporada de orcán, tourists will come and they will have a good time and they can give a good review of the time on our island on Facebook or Instagram or even TikTok. And this will also create more tourists willing to come to our island. Then the last part of my video, that is about crime and violence. Crime and violence. All citizens, ciudadano, have a right, a derecho, to feel safe, seguro, yeah, y seguridad, as they go about their day-to-day activities. So ciudadanos, citizens have a right to feel safe. But same goes, it applies equally to tourists. Tourists can be concerned, preocupar, about threats, menaçanan, which they might experience directly, such as being attacked and robbed. And the government, but also companies involved in tourism, will do anything to prevent this from happening. Because it will not only just happen with the tourists, but it will also, this news will spread to other tourists online, you know, the global village, and it will cause less tourists to visit Curacao or other Caribbean islands, and it will have on the long run a negative influence on tourism and the economy. Yes, so they're also made, so this is an example. I remember this year, this from happening in Punda. A shop was being attacked and robbed, and they tried to leave. The robbers tried to leave this shop in Punda by a scooter, and one of the locals, I think, halted the scooter, and one of the robbers fell on the ground. Yeah. Well, this is one example of a robbery happening in Punda, but things like these shouldn't happen too much because Punda will get a bad image, and tourists will also hear of this from cruise ships, and they will less likely to visit Punda. And on the long run and on the short run, this will have a negative impact on tourism in Punda. So there are also these negative reports are also made anxious. The tourists also made anxious by things like these happening, by reports of high levels of crime. So people become preoccupados, people become ansia. When reports of high levels of crime and violence, like you see here, things like these happening in Punda or other neighborhoods, by reports of high levels of crime and violence in certain areas or community, which might not directly involve them, but when they hear about it, they might become unsettled, and these messages are unsettling. Yeah, these messages are inquietante, or messages are bad, preocupa, for the inhabitants, but also the tourists that might be visiting Punda or Mambo or Otrabal. Luckily, when I Google Punda, when I Google Curacao, we still have like a very low crime rate compared to other islands in the Caribbean. And again, countries like Canada or United States give us a level 1 level of criminality. And that is a very low level. And also when I Google natural disasters in the Caribbean, or crime rate in the Caribbean, we have a level 1, normal precautions in Curacao from the US Department. So that's good because more tourists are likely to visit Curacao. I hope you found this video very helpful. If you want to ask a question, you can do that below. If you want to leave a thumbs up, you can also do that below. And you can also let the bell be rung below. In this section, we have learned to outline regional factors that impact the tourist industry, and keep in mind what the learning verb was, and that is outline. Again, I wish you guys a very nice day, and I hope to see you during my class, and a very well meant goodbye.